This was the moment the Mexican army finally captured one of the most wanted criminals in all of Mexico. Santiago Meza Lopez was a ruthless man who dissolved He dissolved thousands of bodies in caustic soda and acidic solutions for Mexican cartels. But what's fascinating about his story isn't where he ended up, it's where it all began. Who he was before he got entangled in these horrible acts. Believe it or not, we only know one side of Santiago's story. There's another side. The good side. The good side that tells us of a man who had a normal job and lived a normal life. So how did he end up here? And what's even more important is, will he actually be free in 2022? I want you to be both the judge and jury on this one, so buckle up, listen closely, and let's give our verdict. In 2009, Santiago Meza Lopez was arrested by Mexican police for dissolving multiple bodies in acid. Santiago, who obviously didn't have the stomach for crime, pleaded guilty to the offenses put against him. And we know he never had the stomach for the crime because he wasn't even a criminal in the first place. But somehow, in some way, he got trapped in between the dealings of different cartels in Mexico. It all started back in 1996 when Santiago was a farmer in Tijuana, Baja California, Mexico. He worked for the Arellano-Félix Organisation, a fraction of the Tijuana Cartel. He obviously knew he worked for very dangerous people, but he didn't mind. He was doing his job and paid zero attention to whatever they had going on. But on one very dark day, that all changed. The heads of the Arellano-Félix faction, Efrain Perez and Enadina Arellano-Félix, summoned Santiago to come check out an experiment they had going on in the now famous location called the Chicken Coop. Santiago, who had no idea he was literally going to meet his doom, went to check out this mystery experiment. When he got there, he met some random people pouring liters of water into a drum. Efrain then ordered Santiago Meza Lopez to drop a leg of raw beef into that drum and stir it till the leg of beef was completely dissolved in the solution. Santiago stirred and stirred for 2 hours before the entire leg of beef dissolved. Oh, and did I forget to mention how horrible it smelled? Anyways, it was at that moment that Santiago realized it wasn't just water that was poured into this drum. It was a mixture of water and acid. He didn't need anyone to tell him something very bad was about to happen. It all felt wrong, man. Or maybe it was just a horrible stench from the drum, cause I bet that solution smelled crazy bad. But here's where it got tricky for Santiago. He knew he didn't want to mess with the cartel. He could have easily quit his job at that point, but he needed that job more than anything. He had kids, man. And yes, you can still say he could have easily just quit his job to get another one, but there was no guarantee he'd get another one. Instead, he toughened up and made up his mind to stick to farming for the cartel. He went to work the next day, and the day after, and the day after, without anything unusual happening. But 6 months later, Efrain Perez summoned Santiago again and told him they were about to try the experiment one more time, but this time with human flesh. Hearing that must have sent chills down Santiago's spine because, according to his story, he never wanted to do it. And he knew Efrain is definitely not the type of guy that takes no for an answer. But since Santiago had been the cartel's loyal worker for some time, Efrain decided he'd pay Santiago $600 a month for his extra services. He also told him he was going to send a couple of men over to learn the job with him. Santiago was in a huge dilemma. He could either say yes to this new role and join the horrible dealings of the cartel, or say no and maybe take a bullet to the head right on the spot. He accepted, out of fear of losing his life and out of desperation to earn more money. And that was it. That was the moment Santiago became a mirrored version of himself, selling his soul and conscience for money. The hitman for the cartel brought the first body for Santiago and his new crew to take care of. According to Santiago's statement, he remembered taking the victim's clothes off, dropping the victim in the drum of acid before he turned on the gas burner for it to boil overnight. Putting that lifeless man in the drum made Santiago feel like a murderer. But as he resumed his farming job the next morning, everyone acted like they didn't just boil a freaking human the night before. A week passed and no one said anything. Not Efrain, not his hitman, nobody. After a month, Santiago was thanking his stars, thinking it was just a one-time job for the cartel. But 2 months later, he was ordered to dissolve his second body. The cartel knew they could trust him. They waited so long before giving him his second body because they thought he would report what he saw to the Mexican authorities. But Santiago was not a rat. In turn, he became a core member of the Arellano Cartel. The chicken coop was just one of 10 locations that Santiago worked in. He dissolved at least 30 bodies a month and took the dissolved paste to random locations in barrels to dispose. Santiago was in business, and business was good. As good as this solution was, not every human part got dissolved. After dissolving the bodies in the solution, tiny bone fragments, pieces of teeth, and sometimes human nails were left behind. This is where Santiago got the nickname El Pozolero, gotten from the Spanish word pozole. Pozole is a traditional Mexican stew made from hominy meat and other condiments. The stirring of dead bodies as they dissolved felt like stirring a pot of pozole on fire. Now that just makes me want to eat pozole. Anyways, Santiago was at the top of his game, but his greed eventually led to his downfall. After so many years of liquidating hundreds of murdered victims, Santiago was assigned to work with one of the cartel's most dangerous hitmen, Teodoro Garcia Cimental, also known as El Teo. El Teo was a man with a heart of stone. He kidnapped and tortured unlucky victims of the cartel. And more times than not, these victims ended up in that hot boiling solution of El Pozolero's drum. But around 2008, El Teo had a fallout with the Arellano Cartel, taking his much-needed skills to the Sinaloa Cartel instead. Now the twist to this is, he took El Pozolero with him. As the war between the Arellano and the Sinaloa Cartel expanded, many members of the Arellano Cartel were killed and their bodies needed to be disposed of far away from the reach of the police for any possible traces back to him. The big deal here is, El Pozolero shared his dissolving solution with the Sinaloa Cartel, and they bought the idea, making El Pozolero liquidate the bodies of the same men he started the whole business with. The same men that he worked with for the last couple of years. El Pozolero chopped their bodies into pieces and boiled them without any remorse. This made one thing clear, and that's the fact that El Pozolero was only loyal to the dollar. So, how did he get arrested? His arrest in 2009 was a successful plan by the Mexican government, who had been on his trail since 2005. Two hitmen for the Arellano Cartel were arrested for murder, and as a way to reduce their sentence, they told law enforcement about the head of a cleanup crew known as El Pozolero. These hitmen gave a very detailed description of what El Pozolero looked like, making El Pozolero become a high-profile target in several countries. He was even named the 20th most wanted man by the FBI. El Pozolero managed to remain in hiding for 4 years before he was finally caught in the worst way you can think of. El Pozolero, El Teo, and other members of the Sinaloa Cartel threw a wild party in a small neighborhood somewhere in Tijuana. This party went on for days, drawing the attention of the locals. One of the locals went on to tip the police about the presence of cartel members at this party, and a few hours later, the Mexican military burst into the scene to raid the place. With all the cartel members there, only Santiago and 2 others were arrested. Before the army arrived, El Teo and about 30 of his men received information about army vehicles approaching their location, so El Teo fled immediately with his men, leaving El Pozolero, who was drunk to a stupor, behind. And on January 22, 2009, Santiago Meza Lopez was finally arrested. But less than 24 hours later, an armed group with high-powered vehicles attacked the police station where Santiago Meza Lopez was being held, but failed to break him out. El Pozolero confessed to stewing over 300 bodies, but as further investigations went on, more than 1,000 body parts were discovered from their drop-off zones. From the chicken coop location, about 16,500 liters of dissolved bodies were extracted from the drainages, and about 14,000 undissolved body parts were found from other drop-off zones by El Pozolero and his team. What he did was despicable. And since you're the judge here, what sentence would you have given this man? Maybe you think he deserved to die in that same hot boiling acid he controlled for years. Whatever harsh sentence you must have cooked up in your mind, back in 2012, Santiago Meza Lopez was sentenced to only a decade in prison, with charges of his involvement in organized crime and clandestine burials. He wasn't charged with murder because technically he never murdered those victims, they were already dead. Of course, he might have committed a few murders here and there, but there's no evidence to support it. Another reason he was only given 10 years is that clandestine burials are not a huge offense in Mexico. Santiago's set to be released this year, 2022, but for some reason he hasn't been released. Maybe the prosecution have new charges against him, and maybe, just maybe, you'll like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss any of our new videos. In the end, I want you to judge the life of Santiago. Does he deserve to be free, given he was forced into this life of crime? Or does he deserve to rot in jail for annihilating those bodies in the worst way possible? Go ahead and let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below. On your way there, make sure you check out this video showing on your screen. It's just as awesome, so click on it, and I'll see you there.